Welcome to Interzone. I'm Dave Constantino.
I'm Adam Pelche, and you are listening to the debut episode of Interzone, a show where it's very ill-defined, I guess, what exactly we're doing.
Yeah, we don't know what we're doing, but it's going to
Oh,
be a
that's going to net a lot of listeners. That's great.
it's going to be a combination of us interviewing different people within aspects of the arts. So musicians, artists, in all different categories, whether it's music, maybe movies, and authors. There's no boundaries, we should say.
Yeah, that's the thing about the Interzone. We don't set up boundaries, and I think basically we're just going to talk about creative works with creators, discuss our opinions and our thoughts on them, and just kind of go through the gamut of everything we really enjoy. A little history, me and David, we used to run a radio show on CGM 99.1 FM in Windsor, Ontario, and it would be a rock and roll themed show. But we often found that very limiting, and we would branch out to experimental music and jazz and all sorts of other genres, and we would incorporate ideas from outside music too. We would talk about film and books, and it just kind of naturally came about. Well, it's very limiting to just have a show about one set thing or one format. Wouldn't it be great to expand that? And I guess that's kind of I guess you could say the catalyst for the show.
Yeah, we used to do Revolution Rock on CJAM, but now we're trying this, and let's see how it goes. And we're very happy to say on our first episode, we spoke with the Windsor post-rock band What Seas, What Shores, who have a now sold-out show coming up on September 13th at the Meteor here in Windsor that's celebrating a few things. One, their 20th anniversary as a band, and two, the 10th anniversary of their second full-length album, Spiritual Nap Machine.
And it's a great conversation that we had. Normally, the group as a collective doesn't really do interviews. So this was a rarity and a real privilege for us to do. For those who would be listening who fall outside the Windsor area or who may not be too familiar with the band, they have these really great, kind of dreamy, verging on ambient soundscapes that they work with while being entrenched in a lot of post-rock, things that you could take from bands like Slint, for example, or maybe even something like Godspeed. But they have a unique twist on it that gives us this kind of ethereal, dreamlike quality, which I really appreciate. And I'm hoping for those who are established fans of the band, this will give them some insight to the music, to the process. And for those who have not heard of this band before, it's going to be a great introduction. So, yeah, hopefully all sorts of listeners can get something from this interview.
Yeah, last thing I just want to add is we're speaking with all four members of What Seas, What Shores, Martin, Colin, Caleb, and Kyle. So let's get started. My first question is just how did What Seas get together and when did you just start to play as a band?
Who
Who
wants to
wants to
take
take
that?
that?
I'm starting at the very beginning.
I
Well,
can
we should go in
remember.
alphabetical order.
Okay.
Perugia.
Okay, well, that's actually a really tricky question that I've been really trying to think of the last few months, thinking about the band turning 20. I actually don't have very clear memories for some of these finite details. I think because the band started, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but the band started as like a one-off project. Our first show was at Milk for something called Smog Fest. And it was just like some loose ideas put together with Kevin Romaine was there. Like nothing had titles, if I'm correct. Like no, like we just had a couple riffs basically, improvised a set, and then it kind of blossomed from there. So I don't have like a specific memory in my mind of us being like, let's start this band with this idea. I think it just kind of happened
I
at that
can
time.
elaborate a little bit on that. We shared a jam space, and this was at the Walker Power Building, the Peabody Building, which was basically a derelict building that I'd say at least 10 bands had practice spaces in. And this would have been in 2004, 2005, I guess. Maybe even before that, 2003 even. And we had a jam space that I had a band called Elk, and we were practicing there. Caleb and Colin were kind of writing music, like something kind of casual. I think it was just the two of you guys, right?
I
We're
think
kind of
so.
jamming, trying stuff out.
Yeah, yeah. We just wrote some riffs on some Friday nights.
Yeah. And then, we were all hanging out in this same jam space, and we were kind of separately making similar music to an extent. And I think Kevin was probably the one who was just like, why aren't we just playing all of us together instead of three of us playing and then two of us playing? I think that's kind of how it started, because I remember you guys had made a sort of crude recording of something you were working on, and I
Mhm.
liked it. It kind of sounded like Pink Floyd to me. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I have it.
Oh,
You
I'd
really?
love to hear that.
Yeah, I have the CD that Colin burnt me for that.
Oh, I need to hear that. Yeah.
So that's 21-ish years ago now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I actually don't think that we had played our first What Seas show when we were at the Walker Power Building. I think we had already migrated to the Drulard
Yeah,
space.
Basilica.
you're right.
Yeah. So I think I remember there was a day where I think Kevin and Caleb and I were just jamming in there, and Kevin's like, "Oh, you want to throw together something for Smogfest?" 'Cause I think maybe it was Anna was associated with that or something. I think that's who
Yeah.
asked him. And we were jamming a little bit, and I think Kyle, I remember you kind of like just came in that day and we're like, "Hey, grab a guitar, let's do this. Like, get in here. Like, we got some cool ideas."
Yeah. It was pretty improvisational. Like going into that show, we sort of barely had songs. We just had like a few ideas and we were drawing them out for a long time, creating textures, and it was loosey goosey
Yeah, I think we maybe had like three riffs.
that we could drag on for, we probably had a 20-minute set with those three riffs, for better or
Yeah,
worse.
definitely. Well, at that time, Martin was playing with like Bangkok Palace and some other bands and doing Ace of Things for the Future. So, I mean, I think that for me, doing like riffs that were long like that, had like Bloemfontein and those bands were kind of influential. I mean, I can speak for myself. I know we all like them, but and like Mogwai and hearing these things at a young age, I think it was pretty exciting to play these long riffs.
There's a bit of a scene in the city for that kind of music at that time,
So, just out of curiosity, when you said there was kind of a scene for that, like just coming into that scene at that time, that's where I pretty much entered. Who else would you consider as part of that sort of sound or that scene that you were describing?
Oh, one of the bands that we would play with a fair bit was Bangkok Palace. So the other band that Marty was playing with, and then that was a band that was associated with like Bloemfontein. But there was also like Citywide Vacuum was doing stuff like that.
Porsche.
Yeah, Porsche, that's right.
We were playing a lot with Measured in Angles then too.
Yeah,
I remember what season Measured in Angles played a show at Fog to like 9 people, and like some of those shows. What season has always been kind of genre bending in that sense. It would kind of fit in with everybody. We even played, played shows at the Mansion with Post Casket Funeral, on a New Year's Eve, things like that. So there were a lot of bands that we were playing with and doing stuff at the time, for sure.
And how did Martin get involved? Was he involved in the early stuff that you were talking about at Smogfest too?
No, I wasn't. I was just doing my own thing for a while, noisy, very exploratory project called 87 Things for the Future. And that's like, yeah, I don't know, just very kind of noisy improv. I'd make recordings and figure out but live it would be different all the time. I'd like bring my computer and like plug it into an amp and play some noise through that, even though I had a very crude setup back then. So I just wanted to be making some music. And I was also playing when Bloemfontein, certain members couldn't make it, they do like a side project. So they'd be like, let's just do like, oh, instead of this person, Martin will like, I think I played drums on one show and bass on another or something like that. So that was a sort of a loose side project of Bloemfontein, which was also instrumental, spacey, long improv jams, lots of effects and delay and drone and reverbs and just distortions and stuff. So I just kind of hung around these guys and kept like floating around. And we haven't even talked about Josh Saint Denis being the first bassist
Right.
of the band. So
Yeah.
there was a while where it was no bass, right? Or how many shows did you guys play without a bass player? You had like an organ or something for bass, right?
Yeah, maybe 3 shows without a bass player.
And then you guys got Josh Saint Denis because he came to Windsor and he was into all the indie rock, post rock stuff. So
Yeah, he moved down here to play in the London Apartments.
that's right. That's another band that would
That,
be like in
yeah,
that scene of,
yeah.
yeah, Justin.
And yes, we just met him through shows, I think, and then he started hanging around. That time was like Mansion, the first phase. So there was this place to hang out and people would go to play music. It was just a communal space. So generally speaking, I mean, people live there, but yeah. So I think that's where we met him, just through the mansion probably. And he played, and then he left on a whim just before Christmas. And we thought, all right, well, we've got to record these songs. And I'm pretty sure we did it like pretty quickly before he left Windsor. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, the first
All of those
CD
songs? The first CD?
you guys
Yep.
recorded in the basement of the mansion.
Yeah.
The one that we were
And-
talking about the other day that no one has a copy of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone has a CDR or something, but
It exists out there.
there's another story about the artwork which we can maybe talk about later. But so Josh is on all those recordings and I am not. But that's like shortly thereafter, I think. Oh no, actually we played a show at Dr. Disc that was me doing solo stuff, 87 Things for the Future, and then you guys played too at the old Dr. Disc location on south of Wyandotte,
Right.
on Willette Street. So yeah, I don't know. I was just always hanging out with these guys. I mean, I've known Caleb since we were like, I don't know, like 7 years old or something crazy
Yeah,
like
7.
that. So and became friends with Colin in high school, and I met Kyle after that too. Or yeah, in high school actually. We went to different schools. We all just kind of hung out, and then by association, when Josh left, I think I just kind of was like, I want to be in the band now. They let me in.
And Caleb was there was another like Kevin played drums too, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So sometimes we have, a few drum kits set up or some random instruments. They get
Glockenspiel.
glockenspiel, yeah,
Oh,
mini Korg or whatever. And so, but oftentimes there'd be 2 drums. Sometimes there was just one drummer and someone else playing the Glock or whatever. And then he left just after, like pretty soon after we recorded Threads. He wasn't here for the release. And then my first show as the only drummer was the second Harvest of the Fam outside in the courtyard at CW.
is that the one? Because we put together a compilation for CJam's 40th a couple years ago, and there's a What Seas song on there. And I think Kyle, you commented on it. It was like a show where one of the members wasn't there. Is that the same one?
Well, the recording I think that you have is from when we did an episode of the Windsor scene.
Yeah.
But we did a couple shows on campus.
Okay. Yeah.
The one Caleb's referring to was I think normal lineup, but then we played another show that was not a Harvesting the Fam show. It was booked by Christian Gagne, who I think was program director at CJAM maybe at the time, or
Okay.
I forget what his role was, but he was a fan and he had booked us to play in the middle of campus, but we played without Colin.
Yeah, I wasn't there for that.
And it was weird, and it was a mistake. We shouldn't have done it.
Well,
We
also
thought
not,
we could pull it off, and to me, I was lost out there as playing as the only guitar player. It felt really weird.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a recording that exists of that, but
I hope
there's
not.
if not,
Burn
that's
it.
good.
We just talked about when not all the band were present. Now, collectively, I'm always curious about the songwriting process because I think the idea a lot of people have for instrument-led rock and roll bands is you have someone who comes in with a riff, people add on to it, but it's principally one songwriter. What Sees is a very different sort of outfit and a very different stylistic band than your common garage rock group or pop group. You're more experimental and more ethereal. So I wonder, in terms of the songwriting process, how do you contribute to that? How democratic is it? How is it like going through song per song and composing something for a record or for a live show?
It's pretty rare that somebody will bring in a finished piece of music to the band, but it does happen occasionally. But never, we're not writing parts for each other typically, even when that happens. Most of the time, I would say somebody comes in with a couple of core ideas that fit together well and a sort of general hook of some type. And that hook might even be a weird time signature. It often is a weird time signature. Hey, I have this riff. It's in 17/8, goes like this. I was thinking maybe we could build something with this, and then it becomes a song over time. We're all capable songwriters, so most of it is very collaborative. But there's been a few songs where like somebody will have structure, bring that to the band. But things are in flux in what sees. Like we've written songs where we maybe get bored of the structure of it a few years later, or think of a better way of putting the pieces together. And we've rebuilt songs, kind of deconstructed and reconstructed them over the years. So there are various versions of What Sees What Shore songs that exist through time.
That's true. That's a good point. And I think sometimes the recordings, there's not a definitive arrangement of the tune until it's recorded. I mean, for me at least, maybe that's the way it was for me, but
Even beyond that, because we've been discovering with some of these practices, kind of reviewing the old material, we'll have discussions like, oh, when do we change the parts there? How many repetitions, how many times do we play through that? So I'm like, I don't know. I was just kind of feeling it out this whole time.
well, yeah, that's true. Some of the on record it sounds one way, and live it just feels like maybe let's hang out here for a little longer because there were certain maybe studio things we were doing where it would make sense for something to be shorter or longer. But yeah, I think basically Kyle pretty much nailed it or laid it out. If someone has a core idea or like the structure in mind, things kind of dictate for the most part. They give you kind of some options of where to go with your individual parts, but we all kind of, yeah, it's I guess rare where someone's like, I need you to play this exactly this way. It's more like, I have this thing I'm going to do, and then people glom on all their other ideas.
Yeah, and we can kind of anticipate what each other is going to do to some extent. If I bring a riff in, I sort of know, like, I know what Colin does. I mean, there's surprises here and there, but like, we speak the same musical language in that I don't really, none of us need to tell each other what to play, I guess is what I'm getting at. We know what each other does, and it's very democratic in that sense, and that we let each other breathe and let each other express, ideas, and we're not stepping on each other's toes too much.
Yeah, I'd say each one's like collaborative pretty much. Each one triggers the other, invites the other people to kind of contribute, and then that evolves something where it's like, oh, I didn't even. Sometimes we have two separate ideas where one person has one idea and someone else has this other idea, and maybe at first they're two different tunes, and then we stick them together. It didn't occur to us that we could do that. I feel like we've done that before too.
Yeah, I seem to recall too, like maybe a little bit more in the earlier days, we would take like this one or two riffs and we would kind of just sit there and improv on them for like, a half an hour. And then we would kind of almost debrief after, like, hey, what was cool about that jam? What moments did you like? What moments, did we not like? What could we latch onto and develop?
Practices aren't like a standard, like, okay, we need to go over the song structure. It's basically like a reconstruction of things.
Practices now are very structured. We're relearning songs that we haven't played in so long. I mean, they're very structured. There's still room for improvisation, but we've sort of built that into our set that we're rehearsing right now.
Okay.
But practices when we were, fully active band 10 years ago, 15 years ago, sometimes were really lacking in structure. I mean, we'd have songs we wanted to go over, but we'd maybe stretch them out for a long time, or just throw new ideas out there, or just jam pure improv for a while. But nowadays, it's not like that. We haven't got to the stage where we're doing that again yet, although maybe that's a goal for us. But because we have this gig coming up, it's like we have a set and we are rehearsing our set right now.
Did you have to re-listen to some stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, I did. I still am. No, that's it. I've been listening, going back and watching some old performances, and yeah, it's been a long time. So just trying to feel the vibe.
And there are some like weird tunings that I played in too, where when we first decided we were going to play again, which would have been like late last year, I would listen to these songs and I'm like, okay, like my fingers, I think, are doing the right thing, but it is not sounding right, because I would like forget what tuning I was playing in, because there's a couple like just completely made up tunings that I had. So that was challenging. There's one song called Spiritual Nap Machine that I was trying to learn. I listened to it over and over, and I was playing it. And I'm like, I know I'm playing this right, but it just doesn't, it's not sounding right. And then I realized, I had a capo on when I recorded it. I just forgot because we hadn't played the song in 8 years.
I think somebody, when in like the first couple practices that we had, describe the experience as being in a cover band of your own music, like trying to relearn the songs. I feel like I definitely that resonated with me.
Yeah, there was like a feeling of, to me, it was like, oh, we don't have the challenges of like a new band, where you have to like come up with stuff. All we got to do is learn the old stuff. That was kind of a funny feeling to have with a band. I don't know. You're starting a new project that's completely different mindset. But this was like, oh yeah, we used to play this stuff all the time, and how does it go? And it's like having to get that back under the fingers.
I actually have a question about the curation of a upcoming set list because you have a lot of stuff to pull from. You have your own personal recordings, you have what's been released on record. How do you make up that set list? How do you decide to pull what from what sources?
What sources? What?
Well, are you pulling just stuff people will know? I see the list right there.
It's a secret.
Super secret.
No. Yeah, what do we do? Well, I think I threw out a couple ideas of like we should probably balance things, but maybe lean a bit more on the most recent one because we are playing. I mean, it is the 10th anniversary of Spiritual Nap Machine, so you probably want to play a bit of that. I don't think anyone would be happy if we didn't play any of it, right?
Well, we don't have that big of a discography. Like
It's
there's
true.
only 2 full lengths and a couple of EPs. So yeah, it wasn't too hard. Like there's a few songs we left out that were missing. Like at our last practice, Martin and I started kind of playing around with a song that we haven't played in 10 years, probably almost now. So if we do play again, there are some that we're going to work in that didn't make it into this set list, but we're playing a lot of songs. I mean, I'd say we're covering, more than probably close to 50% of our recorded output in this one set list, I'd say.
Oh yeah, I would say
Or
definitely over that. It's funny because we don't have that much music out, but we still we're not playing it all, and it's a pretty lengthy set. I guess that's probably because the tunes themselves are kind of long. Some of them can be longer,
Hmm.
like stretch on for a bit more than a few minutes. Maybe sometimes it's 4 or 5 or 7 or 8. But yeah, I mean, we've got some stuff. If people were like, "Oh, I really liked your first CD or your second CD or your most recent thing," I mean, we pretty much, I think we got it covered.
I wanted to touch a little bit, like we were talking a lot about how you got started, but when you were doing the early, I guess, halcyon days of what sees, how did you like always want it to be somewhat experimental, maybe a little post-rock? Like, is that what you, or did you just play and that's what came out?
I don't know about you guys. I'll just say that I think when I showed up on the scene as your bass player, I was like probably coming from a lot more of a like progressive rock background. So I threw a lot of the ideas of like, I mean, not that you guys weren't into that stuff, but I just, from my standpoint as a bassist, I was like, I really want to play something in like a really crazy time signature. So I don't know, maybe you guys also wanted that too, but I don't know if that answers the question or it kicks things off.
I think like we all bring a lot of pretty diverse influence to that. There's a lot of bands and influences that I think we share, but then I think everyone has kind of their own stuff. Like I've always tried to incorporate a lot of like finger picking stuff into playing, right? Because I, listen to a lot of folk music, and I mean, Wootsies doesn't have, it's not a folk band by any stretch, but like there are kind of finger pick patterns and stuff like that that I've inherited from that kind of vein of my interests. And I think everyone kind of brings something like that into the mix.
yeah, when I listen to or even just think about some of our early stuff, I think I was really just trying to do a more Godspeed You Black Emperor or Silver Mount Zion type thing with guitar. There's some tones that I was trying to copy that are like really specifically from the Silver Mount Zion album Born into Trouble. Just at that time, that was very, influential to me in that moment. But that's really like, that's just in a moment in time. There's been, other songs that we've written where I was really listening to a lot of maybe June of 44 or Shipping News or something like that. So it really depends. Song to song, there are just different like ideas that I get inspired by guitar wise. And that probably goes for all of us. Like, I think we have a lot of different sounds in our songs. So even within one song, we may be drawing from like a lot of different inspirations, each of us. But some of the big ones would be like Tortoise, Do Make Say Think, Godspeed in the early days, especially, Slint. But it's more than that. Like sometimes classic, like we all like classic rock a lot too. So like my use of like a wah pedal comes from just like listening to great classic rock guitar players.
Absolutely. Like, but I think like Colin was saying, there's a lot we all have interest in, but there's a lot of commonality that we all have. Like we're all pretty much gonna enjoy a Black Sabbath record or like a Zeppelin record or something, or like a Neil Young and Crazy Horse record.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, we each have these little quirks.
I guess then when you just play together, it just comes out this way. It's its own thing.
For better and worse.
Yeah. It's its own thing.
And I think that a lot of our sound and our vibe as a band comes from just long friendships as well. Like it's fun for us, like the band has always been fun. And so I think that makes it like we all know each other. So we know what our background and our influences are like. We know how we play. We all know what we're listening to at the time generally. So I think that is a huge part of as our influences is just even each other. We're always sharing music.
We brought up briefly the album sleeve for the last record and just art in general for what's been on your releases. I'm just kind of curious what has been kind of the origins for the respective album artworks for the EPs for the two records.
So as far as Spiritual Nat Machine, Murad Erzinflio, who is he is many things. He's a creative individual. He is also a photographer. And so the artwork for that is photographs that he's taken. And I don't know if I should say more about that, kind of leave it a little mysterious. I mean, it's a little abstract, but they're pictures that Murad took for Spiritual Nat Machine. Front and back cover of book is. For Threnodies, it was photographer Matty Moran, correct?
Yep. And an interesting side note on that artwork, because I love the picture that he took of that's obviously at Olet Riverside Drive. But the font on the CD has always been something that every time I see the CD, I'm like, oh yeah, reminds me of the time. We didn't apparently the people that were manufacturing the CD for us didn't. I don't know. They didn't get a font pick from us, so they just put that on there and printed us 1,000 copies. And so.
Nice
I mean, there was no going back on it, but like nobody actually picked the font for that CD.
Oh,
Some person working in Toronto behind a desk did, I believe.
I think actually, here's my recollection, and if this rings a bell for anyone else, let me know. They initially gave us a different font, and none of us liked it. And we said we need to change the font, but we didn't give them two specific directions. They gave us a second font, and everyone was like, sure, whatever. It's time's running out.
Yeah, that's jogging my memory because the first font, I remember it being like, it looked like a graffiti kind of tag.
Comic Sans graffiti, I think.
And then they gave us the second one, and we just needed the album in our possession immediately because we were about to leave to play some shows. So we're like, all right, fine. I think that was the reaction. I was, all right, fine. That's the font.
Pull up the email thread right now. It says, all right, fine. Yeah.
And what about cordyceps? I'm curious about that.
Whose idea was it to call it cordyceps?
Kyle's.
Yeah, around that time, so that's like 2007, 2008. BBC Planet Earth was like, I was watching a lot of that. A lot of David Attenborough in my household at the time. And I had never heard of cordyceps. And then there's an episode of Planet Earth where there's just like beautiful photography of cordyceps, just, and David Attenborough's narration of it. I was like, this is amazing. There's a zombie fungus. Now everybody knows what cordyceps is, but at the time, unless you watched that little bit of Planet Earth, it wasn't really like a commonly known thing. So I just thought that what an amazing organism that it can just take over a creature's brain and tell it to climb up so that it can kill the creature and then release its spores. That's great. I still think it's really cool. And obviously a lot of people do. When The Last of Us came out, I was like, oh, yeah, I know all about that stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting story about when that came out. I was at the release show, which I think was at the Fish Market, but there was no album artwork. And there was a temporary cover made with that, it had like writing font, and that's the one I have. But now there's an actual like cool picture.
There are a few versions of that exist, but the main reason for that is that we pressed those 7 inches at Archer record pressing, which is in Detroit. Archer, at least at the time, like they didn't really do sleeves. They just made your vinyl. And it was a really good price too. So we were just like, well, we'll make our own sleeves, being inspired by, punk from the 80s or good labels like that hand roll their sleeves. I'm blanking on the label, the Do Make and Godspeed label, where they're
Constellation?
Constellation, yeah. They hand roll their and stencil some of their albums, and so that was the inspiration for that. We just thought we'll make them ourselves.
We spray painted stencils on some of these. We had white labels, right? So for some of them, we created stencils and spray painted these things. I think on some of them we get paint on the the inner groove of the final you call it the run out groove. Anyway, that's just kind of a funny little thing.
It says it was done on Peely Island with James Owell, another local musician from the Villains and solo artist as well. I just wanted to ask about the recording because I remember talking about it with both James and some of you guys. Maybe you can just talk about how you made this on Peely Island. Because I think there's 2 songs on here, but then there was a couple extra songs when you bought it online, right? That you could download as well.
Yeah, there was a little bit of extra stuff that got. I think I made one little remixy type little segue thing that
Oh,
was just kind of looping things. And then there's another track which is so in between the first and second track, there's a moment where the bass loop from Pave the Oceans is playing. And there was we did a recording of an improvisation. So there's a lot of guitars kind of just
Okay.
improvising. It's mostly ambient. And for the record, we used like maybe a minute and a half, or probably less than that actually. It's around a minute long, but we actually recorded way more. So I think it was a combination of crickets and tree frogs from Peely Island that at night got really loud. So we had microphones pointing out and recording that. And then the guitars improvising around that loop, like the extended version of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the other track. So it's just, yeah, when you go to digitally download that, there's bonus material.
And you can get that online now.
That's right. Have you guys heard that stuff in a while? The kind of Colin, Kyle, Caleb.
I haven't. I actually forgot
Heard it
about
a
it.
long time.
Yeah, I actually forgot that we had those extended versions of it. I'm going to go back and listen to it later tonight.
We were talking about compositions, we're talking about performances for recording these albums, but I'm kind of curious about the live performances because you're going to be having your show coming up very soon. It's just September 13th. And I know you've toured a lot, especially in the early days of the band. I'm just kind of curious. I know everyone kind of has their war stories of their early days touring. If you have any anecdotes or interesting stories that really stick in your mind to this day.
That's a good question. We did a tour out east in the very early days of the band. We bought a van specifically to do this tour. Had a whole host of problems. Leaky gas tank that we discovered a few shows in. And we're not savvy with vehicles whatsoever. We're like, we bought some epoxy at a gas station or something, and we're trying to slap it on there. It was very DIY. I mean, like most bands' first tours are. We booked it through MySpace pretty much almost exclusively because at the time, 2005, 2006, you could do that. MySpace was really excellent for bands in terms of, the features available. You could put your music on there. You could list your influences. You could communicate with other bands. You could find other bands very easily and connect with them in other cities. And so we just kind of started connecting with bands from the East Coast and booked a short tour out there. And we screwed the route of that tour up, like the plan for it, and booked sort of the last show out east was supposed to be in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. The night before we played, I guess, was it Halifax, probably?
No,
And
it
we
was New Brunswick.
New Brunswick, yeah. And
We backtracked.
we didn't realize until like we were in New Brunswick that there was basically no way that we could have got to Yarmouth in time to play the show the next day because it was so far. We just like it was just an oversight on our part, so we had to cancel the last date of that, the last East Coast date of that tour.
And not to mention that like we were already in Nova Scotia playing Halifax. We left there to go back to New Brunswick, and then we were going to drive all the way to the very southern tip of Nova Scotia again for our last show to drive home. We're like, that's an additional 13 hours of driving. All
Plus
right.
a ferry.
Yeah. All right.
And we were, I think, not
Broke.
exactly making a lot of money on this tour.
I think we counted on the ferry working out for us, and it became evident that we either hadn't booked a spot in time or something like that. There was something that we discovered last minute that made the trip to Yarmouth impossible.
Maybe one day, right? Maybe one day we can get back out to Yarmouth.
Our next tour was much better, though. I will say that we toured out west, and I think we played around, I want to say close to 20 shows in that tour, or maybe not 20, but in the teens. We played a lot of shows in that West Coast tour. We were playing, I think we only had one day off. I wanted, probably 15 shows at least.
Oh, for sure. Well, we doubled up, right? We played 2 in Vancouver, 2 in Edmonton, 2 in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Thunder Bay, Saskatoon, Regina, Lake Louise, Owen Sound, Hamilton, Toronto. Like that was a long one.
Yeah, it was a great one too.
A couple of years back, you played some shows with Shuhari, and then you went to Japan and you toured there, right?
Right.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about the experience playing shows in Japan and how it maybe differed from other places you've played, whether with What Seas or any other musical output you've been involved with.
Yeah, that whole thing came about because we were in the process of releasing Spiritual Nat Machine, and that was being facilitated through a good friend of ours, Josh Richardson, who lives in Owen Sound and has a label called Mudtown Records. So he was helping to release that album. I don't think it wasn't the album release show, but it was a show that we were playing up there around the time that we were recording the record. And someone in the audience, Mike, approached us after and just happened to be back home visiting Owen Sound, but he lives in Kaohsiung and had a venue there, and was booking bands, and he really, really strongly encouraged us to come out there and to let him book us a string of shows. And Shuhari was another band that he regularly booked out there from Japan, so he put us in contact with them, and they were able to set us up with a few shows in Tokyo as well.
Yeah, it was amazing. I'll say this little tidbit: the sound systems in Tokyo were mind-bending. They were so clear and so loud. I can't explain it. That's a fun little,
Yeah. And the shows were nice
experience.
and early too, because, public transportation is how the vast majority of people are getting home. And the trains in Tokyo stop running around midnight. So shows are done by, I think all of them were done before 11, maybe even earlier. And then, we had time to go out, have a bite to eat, and then get on the train and get back to our hotels. And the bands we played with were great and really welcoming, and venues, yeah, amazing. You don't need to tour over there with amps or drums because every venue has backline, and like good quality backline too. You're just putting your guitar in a gig bag on your back and carrying your pedals and getting on the train, going to the venue. That element of playing shows over there was incredible. We didn't have to rent a vehicle, worry about, driving in a country we're not familiar with. Alleviating that the need for a vehicle makes playing shows so much more pleasant, I think.
Yeah, having all that backline was really nice, and also they were really kind of it seemed like pretty organized. Like you're saying, they would be early, but they would be like, this is when the bands sound check, and this is when the bands play, and they would have it like down to the minute. Be like 7:25, this band plays, and they go until whatever, 7:52, something.
Very
Exactly.
different from what we're used to, having played so many shows in Windsor where time doesn't matter to people. It's like, oh, the
Yeah.
poster always says 9 p.m., but sometimes it's like 10 o'clock and you're like, can we start? And they're, well, there might be some more people showing up in 15 minutes. Let's give it another 15, 20, 30 minutes. That does not happen in Japan,
Well,
at least in our experience, but I think that would be frowned upon probably most places, actually.
Yeah, you don't get the
I remember
question, well, what time does the show really start?
Yes.
one of the shows that stood out the most to me in Tokyo was a place called Knock, and the room was cool and the bands are great. And I believe there was 7 bands, and everyone played for like 25 minutes. I think is what every band had. And the show, I had the flyer for it. The show started at 6, and for the first hour, your entrance fee came with like basically it was like an all you can drink beer for the first hour, and that's what it says on there. Like includes drinks and like your bracelet for the first hour, and like that, everyone showed up. Why would you miss that? You wouldn't miss that. So everyone goes there and had a couple beers, and then after the second band starts playing, you pay for your drinks. But I thought that was really cool.
Oh, here's a fun little, I remember this. There was a visual artist at one of the shows. I can't remember the name of this venue, but you guys, someone else has the poster for it. That rehearsal space place
Was that
studio.
Mod Studio
Mod
in
Studio.
Meguro?
Sure, let's go with that. But there was an artist doing projections of live paint, like paintings and like oils and stuff. Her name's Akiko Nakayama, and she's like pretty big deal right now. She's doing like visual stuff with floating points, like collaborating with floating points. So she was doing art for our yeah, for one of our sets in Tokyo.
Yeah, it was like a liquid light show with paint. Incredible. Very fun to watch.
Yeah.
She'd be like, blowing it around with a straw and then mixing oil and water paints and swirling it on a plate. I loved that.
Super nice too.
That show was in this, like I said, place called Mod Studio, and it was actually a recording studio that you can rent the space, pack people in it, and they sold beer. And so that was our last show of the tour, and I thought it was really great. Like in a basement, dark room, no windows, recording studio, just everyone's crammed in there. It was special.
Yeah, the people we met, there was a lot of bands we played with. So there was the Spring Scream Festival in Taiwan, and we built shows around, or the Mike helped us book shows based around that. So it's a festival, a show before we get to the festival, and then several shows after. And then we went to Tokyo and played shows there. So people that we met at the festival, we didn't really know. By the end, like we'd see a lot of the same people at different shows, and then we'd play with the bands and their friends. So then by the time we got to Tokyo, these were people that we kind of were casually seeing through the course of like a week and a half. And they made us feel really welcome, and they were like there, watching us, buying the shirts and all that stuff, and just being really, really nice. So we were treated excellently with the hospitality.
I just have a quick question, and this kind of goes off of something Kyle said, because I'm glad you brought up the Windsor time phenomenon. Anyone who's listening to this podcast who's not from the region may wonder what this is referring to. There is a tendency for shows to play a lot later than they're advertised in this area. And I
Yep.
just take that as part and parcel of the region. But I always wonder how much your environment informs your creative work, whether it's painting, whether it's making music. And I'm just wondering, and not to get too abstract with this, but could you pinpoint anything about the environment here of the Windsor region that informs the creation of your music?
I think that might be hard for any of us to identify because when you're in it, you don't see it as much. Maybe people from outside the band might be able to pinpoint that more. I'm not sure.
I mean, I mean, you could throw out a couple of, like you said, abstract, right, Adam? I'm curious about if other people have things. Yeah, like if Adam or David, you're like thinking, this sounds like Windsor in this way. I mean, you could say someone somewhere might say to themselves, Windsor is kind of kind of a sad place in some ways. There's like a lot of concrete everywhere. There's a lot of factories and trucks. There's a lot of smog. Like the origins of this band, right? Smog Fest. That's a something people put on because it was like a form of acknowledging the pollution in the area. So yeah, maybe there's something there with like the sort of people, the image of people kind of like trying to get some fresh air and being kind of bummed out by being surrounded by just trucks and concrete and smog, and like that little glimmer of, well, whatever, hope or like frustration
That's a good answer.
has that. I don't know.
That's a great answer. If you think about some of the little aesthetic things involved in our band, they're, connected to those ideas like Pave the Oceans. The image on the Pave the Oceans label is smokestacks, which is a very, industrial Windsor area type of image. And the cover of Spiritual Nap Machine being just sort of this deteriorated surface. Those ideas, yeah, those come from the influence of living in a place that's kind of an underdog. It's had a rough go. But in terms of like the sound of the music we make, I'm not really sure. I think anyone is influenced by where they are and the music they're hearing growing up. I guess maybe that's, our love of classic rock comes from having access to Detroit radio stations as kids. And I mean, people are into classic rock all over the world, obviously, but there are influences that come in from where you live, but I can't pinpoint them necessarily musically. But aesthetically, yes, I think Martin hit the nail on the head there.
I just bring this up because I was given this anecdote one time by somebody, and it was in relation to a lot of these bands, as you mentioned, that were coming around maybe the mid 2000s, early 2010s, a lot of instrumental, long performances with some aspects of drone. And this person said to me, "Oh, is this because Windsor sounds like a drone?" And I thought, well, we had like the famous Windsor hum. We have the industrial sounds of the city. And I've always wondered if that has in some way informed some of this of a stylistic choice for various groups. I don't know how much that informs people's intent in composing this music, but that's something that's always stuck with me.
I would say any of these influences, in my perspective, are unconscious. It's not until after looking back that I kind of see through lines and themes for a lot of stuff. But to me, I don't think any one of us were like consciously saying, this is the theme I'm working on with this like tune or whatever. It's just like, I think subconsciously and unconsciously, we're all just comes out that way. If there are themes, probably they're already there, in people who are observing.
We also want people, like, things are better when they're up to individual interpretation of the listener, especially when you're in a band that has no vocals and no lyrics. So it's fun to put abstract song titles out there or album covers that aren't, it's not very clearly depicting anything, because people can just make up their own stories about it and have their own connection to it.
100%.
Yeah. The only other thing I have in terms of influences, we've talked about bands, we've talked about environments. I'm going to ask what probably should have been the first question last from me, which is about the name of the band, because it's always been something that pulled me to it. The reference to the T.S. Eliot poem. I'm wondering what came about to make that the name of the group, and what sort of influence does T.S. Eliot, does poetry have an influence on the group, or is it just kind of happenstance that happened to be the name of the group?
It came from Kevin Romaine, our former drummer, and it came really because choosing a band name is something you have to do, and it wasn't a grand idea. It was just kind of like, we need to pick a band name, and that's what he came to the table with, and we all thought it was pretty good. That's really it.
Yeah, when we were getting ready to play that Smogfest, that first show, we had committed to it, and we didn't have a name at the time. And as it neared, the promoters of it were like, well, we got to put something on the poster. So I think Kevin had been reading that poem maybe recently, or it was something that was in his mind. And we were all, yeah, fine with it.
And then he skipped town and left us with his name. Quit the band. What does
They
that
left
tell
his
you?
legacy.
I'm just kidding. We love Kevin, and he's actually gone on to be an amazing, accomplished musician in the Vancouver scene. So he's got a solo record out that just came out recently. Pretty good.
Yeah, excellent musician, great guy.
I wanted to ask, I think there's not much left. I think we had, Adam, but we always both wondered about the name. So you've been going through songs and playing a lot together lately, and your show sold out already, which is amazing. I know this was just a thing to play a show. Is there any thought to maybe more shows in the future, maybe more recordings or music?
We'd all love to do all of the above. We've been having a lot of fun playing together and hanging out, and we're very excited about this show. So I would say the door is open to any of those things happening, but no imminent, immediate, firm, defined plans. But we're having fun and we want to continue to have fun. So hopefully there's more coming down the pipeline.
All right, David, that was our interview with What Seas, What Shores. Again, depending when you're listening to this, you might actually be able to see them live September 13th. Although, if you're listening to this afterwards, or perhaps if you have not bought a ticket already, well, tough luck. But an incredible group, and if you haven't heard of them before, definitely well worth checking out. They have a Bandcamp page, whatseaswhatshores.bandcamp.com. You can purchase some of their music there. And yeah, that is quite the first episode to have for this new podcast, Interzone.
Yeah, thanks again to the band for joining us and Adam as well for joining me on this episode of hopefully more of Interzone.
You turned a little Bob Dylan in that one. I like that. Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll be talking about Dylan. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll be talking about nothing but sandwiches next episode. You're going to have to find out. So you can check us out. We're going to be on all the platforms, which you're going to see linked wherever you're listening to this. So, of course, you can always subscribe and like. And stay tuned for future episodes. Don't forget to click that bell icon as well.
Until next time, this has been Interzone.